In 77 AD, Roman scholar Pliny the Elder recorded one of the most overlooked maritime routes in ancient history. A route, when properly read, leads directly to a chain of islands abounding in gold and silver. Known as Chryse and Argyre in Greek, or Ophir and Tarshish in Hebrew. Today, we reveal the truth that academia has buried for centuries. Before we begin, let's set up some basics for maps available to Pliny in and around his era. We know that Pomponius Mela in 43 AD, 30 years before Pliny, mind you, and they ran in the same Roman circles, mapped Chryse as an island, because it was never credibly a peninsula. That's illiterate. Per the ancient directions from the olden writers of Greece. Now that is monumental. Chryse was to the east of Tammuz, a well-noted point on the South China Peninsula. Oh yeah, and recorded by Mela himself, especially on his map. That is southeast of Ceres, which is China. And anyone who thinks the Malay Peninsula is that far north and to the east of China in the South China Sea, well, they need to check their screws because some may be loose. After all, he even labels Malay by its ancient name, Colus, which Mela says in his text is the next major peninsula, placing Chryse between South China, Tammuz, and Malay Peninsula, which is Colus. To the east, as an island, well, that would be the South China Sea. Pretty easy, or at least it should be. To those claiming we can't read ancient maps because, well, they do not have some geography, well, they need to learn what to do when one is lost in the woods. You search for fixed points. Focus there, not on things that are misplaced, like, say, the Ganges River, which is because Josephus messed that up, claiming the Ganges was the Pison River from Eden. It was not, and they knew it was not, but this is very telling. You see, they typically didn't move Chryse over to the Ganges. They moved the Pison River they thought was the Ganges to Indochina, so it runs to Chryse in the Philippines, because they knew where it was, not in what we call India today. India is a reference to the entire Orient, and that's the way it's used on ancient maps. To not notice that and call oneself a scholar or a cartographer is absolutely inexcusable. China is a major fixed point on this map, as is the Malay Peninsula, labeled Colus, as is the South China Sea. Really not difficult. And that is an island. Well, it's in the Philippines, period. That is nothing else. Anyone saying, oh, that's the Malay Peninsula, cannot read. Any so-called theory is a failure to read a map that calls that anything but the Philippines, and specifically, that's Luzon Island, folks. Now, that's the way ancient maps should be viewed if read as not interpretation, but simply by reading the map. The same goes for the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea in 50 AD. We've covered this much, which identifies Chryse east of mainland Asia in the South China Sea, southeast of China. Hello, that's pretty easy to figure out what that is. Anybody saying, oh, that's the Malay Peninsula, can't read a map. That's all. It's easy. Very, very easy to determine. They cannot. And this same mindset carries over to Dionysius of Alexandria. Yep, there's Chryse, southeast of Ceres, China, in the Philippines. Read Garden of Eden Revealed, the book of maps for detail and sources. Free in ebook at thegodculture.org. Now for Pliny, who begins stating, "Beyond the mouth of the Indus are the islands of Chryse and Argyre." This frames the destination, not the start, in the far east. Read our blog for details and sources. These islands are beyond India, not next to it. His actual route? That begins in China, the territory of the series. Just read the chapter heading, not difficult. So let's follow Pliny's steps exactly. Step 1. The first river that is known in their territory is the Citharis. This is the Yellow River in northern China. Step 2. Next to that, the Kambari. This is the Yangtze River, central China's mighty waterway, otherwise known as the Chang, and also in the area of Cambria. All ties. Read our blog. Step 3. And third, the Laos. The Mekong River, visible as it enters southern Vietnam from Laos. Laos. That's pretty easy. It's also known as the Lao River, and it ties to China, where it begins. Pliny is mapping a maritime route, not an overland journey. These rivers are seen from sea lanes, marking the route south along China's coastline. Next, after crossing the sea, we come to the promontory of Chryse. A promontory is a rocky coastal point, according to the most credible of dictionaries, that is. Since Pliny called Chryse an island, well, this cannot be a peninsula. You see, islands have promontories too. The likely candidate? Well, nothing else is there. The Philippine archipelago, with promontories like Mindoro's Calavite Point or Palawan's Cliffs, and pretty much most of the islands have promontories. And the Gulf of Sinaba. Some would say Sin, South China Sea, duh, pretty easy, right? But you know what? Actually, it was once called the Gulf of Champa or Siamba, which matches this designation and doesn't lead to the Malay Peninsula, but across to the Philippines. Pliny describes a sea crossing, not hugging coastlines, bringing us away from Vietnam and toward the Philippines. The river Atianos and the nation of the Atacori. Let's take a look at the Philippines, which we haven't seen a single scholar ever do, and determine whether these are Filipino names. Now this is impossible unless it's true. The Batiano River in Iloilo, home of the Ati people. Fits this? Oh, exactly. More details in our blog, but Ano in Greek means upland, and these tribes lived in high terrain, as there are mountains nearby. We also have a probable tie. Atacori may reflect the Ata peoples of the Philippines. The Greek kori means maiden, possibly denoting cultural characteristics or attire, perhaps. Pliny continues, a people protected by their sunny hills from all noxious blasts, living in a climate like the Hyperborean. This means perfect tropical balance, not the seasons of Japan or even India for that matter. The thing is, it does not matter whether this legend of Hyperborea is even true. The point is simple. Pliny is merely calling the tropical climate out here. That's it. And that's the Philippines, folks. A major note of Hyperborea, well, it has 2 harvests, and the Philippines has 2 annual harvests, perpetually warm and hilly regions protected from typhoons. Chryse and Argyre, abounding in metals, some say their soil is gold and silver. Now, this one is affirmed by Pomponius Mela and also by Selenius in 300 AD. So this is a legend that carried for thousands of years, and that's because, well, it was proven to be true. Now, because he didn't see it, Pliny was skeptical, of course, but archaeology confirms it. The Philippines still has vast alluvial gold deposits to this very day. For the islands of gold were never a myth. So, what happened? Scholars redefined islands as peninsulas, for one. Pliny never did. They moved routes inland and on mainland Asia that were islands. They erased Philippines from maps of Chryse and Argyre, of Zupangu, of the many names of the land of gold, which every single one leads to the Philippines. Map after map, historic reference after reference. Those that are steeped in the true ancient records with accuracy lead to the Philippines. View our blog for a complete mapping of Pliny's directions. But even Thomas Suarez misrepresented Pliny horribly. I mean, just in the most illiterate way possible, claiming he described a peninsula when he clearly said islands. We showed you. Read the blog. Here's a mapping of Pliny's route. It's not academic. To boil these directions down to a paraphrase from Suarez. Yeah, Pliny said something about 3 rivers and a bay. So that must be a peninsula. Because, well, he did not bother to read that Pliny already said that Chryse and Argyre were islands. Duh. That is illiterate propaganda, not cartography. Why do we treat it that way? Why do we settle for such rubbish is the real question. Pliny's route is clear. From the rivers of China to the tropical, gold-rich islands across the sea, this is a route to the Philippines. Not India, certainly not Japan. Chryse was never lost. It was only hidden. The Isles of Gold are still here. Subscribe for notifications at thegodculture.org because, well, YouTube just forgets to notify. Read the full research at thegodculturephilippines.com, read our blog, and our publishing, Garden of Eden Revealed, the Book of Maps. Free in ebook now at thegodculture.org/books. Yah bless to everyone. In the beginning, a garden was planted, enclosed within the earth, in the east, the Orient, far east, says Enoch before the flood, and Noah, who lived there and mapped it in the Philippines. The Bible has always led there, and even Bible historians knew how to read the Hebrew, such as Josephus in 90 AD, Lactantius, an African, in 310. And in 550, Cosmos, the Greek monk and merchant traveler who went to the Indies, wrote in Alexandria, Egypt, Africa, Christian topography, and he mapped paradise as the Philippines. That map was even published in the Greek edition of the Bible at one time, a 6,000 6,000-year track record, forgotten today by illiterate scholars. They have no education on this topic. Let us explore this massive trove of ancient maps. Israel is not east, and a spring is a spring, not a river, and must be fed by a mega river as its source, and must connect to 3 other heads as well, all rivers, and actually salt water even. Can they read? Africa is not east, nor in Shem's far east, where the garden has always resided. Mesopotamia is the occult creation myth of the Nephilim. Nice, scholars. Modern rivers from rain did not even exist before the flood, and the Bible never uses the word Tigris ever in the original Hebrew. Why do modern scholars have no clue when the evidence is so vast? The Garden of Eden revealed, resolving the 6,000-year testimony, marking the Far East. Now available in print only, no ebook, on Amazon and Shopee Philippines. Over 75 high-resolution color historic maps with accurate interpretation no one can truly dispute. Get your book now, and a new series begins.